Hello, Professor. My name is Wang Jie, and my student ID is JIEEJ. And today, I'm going to present my research ideas out loud. And my program is Doctor of Philosophy. And firstly, I would like to introduce my research issues or problems. And here are 3 items. Firstly, understanding the mental state of the writer, like Alice Munro, how the mental state of the author influences the narrative style, language choices, and the psychological depth in Runaway. Yes, my literature text is Runaway, written by Alice Munro. And secondly, psycholinguistic markers in the text, identifying language patterns that might reflect psychological states such as cognitive dissonance, emotional turbulence, and moments of clarity. At last, narrative structure of the writer's mental state, exploring how the writer's perspective affects the overall structure and storytelling method, including the use of unreliable narration shifts in narrative focus and character development. Secondly, research objectives or research questions. The first research objective is to identify specific psycholinguistic markers in Runaway that may reflect the mental state of the writer. The second research objective is to explore the correlation between the writer's mental state and the linguistic choices such as sentence structures, metaphors, and the narrative shifts. The first research question is how do the cognitive and emotional states of the writer manifest through language in Runaway? And the second research question is how do the narrative techniques and the language reflect the writer's evolving mental state throughout the story? Third, my research desires are as follows. Mixed methods desire. This study will use a combination of cognitive and quantitative methods. As for quantitative method, detailed texture analysis focusing on the linguistic features and psychological interpretation of the text. As for quantitative method, statistical analysis to identify patterns in sentence length, word choice, frequency of certain types of emotional or cognitive language, etc. Fourth, population or sampling subject of the study or source of data. At first, background of the population and the sample. Population like in this study consists of the works of Alice Munro, particularly focusing on her short story Runaway. The sample will be limited to the entire text of Runaway, as it represents a self-contained narrative and allows for in-depth exploration of the writer's psychological underpinnings. My sampling method is the focus will be on a detailed, intentional section of the entire text of Runaway rather than on multiple works by Munro. To gain a focused analysis, fifth, research instruments or data collection procedures. Textual analysis framework, a framework based on psycholinguistics, focusing on linguistic markers or mental states such as cognitive load, complexity of sentence structure, emotional language, use of emotionally charged adjectives, verbs, etc., metaphors, and imaginary linked to psychological states, dialogue, and internal monologue for insights into a character's psychological states. Corpus-based approach, analyzing the frequency of psychological terms, emotional language, or cognitive terms in the text, and interviews expert opinions. Optionally, interviews with literary critics or psycholinguistic experts for additional perspectives on the text, linguistic and psychological content. For development construction of instruments, psycholinguistic markers will be developed through a review of literature in psycholinguistics and previous studies of the language and mental states in literature. A coding manual will be created to define the linguistic categories such as emotional intensity, narrative structure, and cognitive states. 6. Data analysis. The first one is called quantitative analysis. First, thematic analysis, analyzing recurring themes in the text related to emotional states, cognitive challenges, and mental health. These will involve close reading and coding for language patterns that suggest psychological phenomena. And the second one is discourse analysis, analyzing how the text structure, use of dialogue, and the narrative style reflect the psychological state of writer and the characters. Quantitative analysis. I use frequency analysis using software, for example, to count and analyze the frequency of specific psychological terms or sentence patterns that may indicate mental states. And for statistical analysis, identifying correlations between narrative shifts and changes in linguistic patterns, such as longer sentences, complex structures, or emotionally intense language. 7th, expected findings. For psycholinguistic markers, the analysis will likely reveal that the author's mental state is reflected in the narrative style, including complex sentences, shifts in emotional language, and specific word choices. And the narrative impact. The narrative structure in Runaway may reveal patterns of emotional fluctuation, such as shifts in the story's pace, perspective, or tone, which can be linked to the writer's psychological state. Psychological themes related to cognitive dissonance, confusion, emotional withdrawal, or clarity may be identified through the writer's use of metaphor and narrative techniques. And at last, I expect to find the language and mental state correlation. A clear correlation between the writer's mental state and certain language patterns is expected, which may provide insights into how mental health and cognitive processes influence writing. And at last, here are my references. And the first part is psycholinguistic theory, for example, using language from Cambridge University Press and etc. And the second part reference is literary analysis of Alice Munro. For example, the original text, Runaway. And the last part is psycholinguistics and literature. Here are all my references. And at last,